The Naruto series always made it extremely clear that Minato was always seemingly a step above Naruto. Naruto, the young knucklehead troublemaker failing the graduation exams 3 times, Minato, the Yellow Flash, the 4th Hokage, the man who single-handedly won the 3rd Great Shinobi War, highest graduation scores ever. Kishimoto, all the way up until the end of the war arc, had several different levels of shinobi skill in which he needed to acquire of his father's level. Jutsu creation, jutsu alteration, senjutsu speed, you name it. So what would happen if Naruto and Minato were to swap fights? Well, guess what? Your boy Virtue is about to discuss it, so yeah. Structure is similar to my Minato and Itachi version, just simply analyzing each fight. However, for this, Naruto obviously has many more forms, so I'm just going to go with the Naruto that fought White Mask Obito in the war arc, and that's about the farthest we get. Naruto can choose to enter Sage Mode, KCM1 or KCM2 just based on the opponent and whatnot, and Minato will be alive whilst he was Hokage. And yeah, let's get straight into this. Also, a side note, there will be a lot more Minato matchups since Naruto has way more fights, so you'll see like several Minato matches back to back. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this video, and I hope I give you guys all a good understanding on when Minato was truly surpassed by Konoha's Orange Hokage. So the first match shouldn't be super contentious, but of course there'll always be that one guy in the comments. So yeah, we got Kakuzu and Hidan. Now Minato won't have like the aid of Kakashi, Choji, Shikamaru, and Ino and Yamato and whatnot, but that's just because Minato doesn't really need all that. Speed for all of these matches, at least in regards to Minato, is by far the most important aspect, which Kakuzu isn't really all that impressive in. During his bout with Kakashi and gang, we could see that Kakuzu's attacks are always being reacted to by Choji, Shikamaru, and Ino, which would obviously mean that Minato won't be hit by any of these attacks, since even as a Jonin, there are several statements that put Minato near KCM1 in speed, which is above Kakuzu. There are arguments, however, that do support Kakuzu being this level of speed. However, even though I've debunked these before, I'll discuss them again here in like a Spark Notes version. The argument, or the first argument, is the more unknown of the two, being that during the war arc, you can see that Kakuzu is carrying Nagato on his shoulder, and he's keeping up with Edo Itachi in travel speed whilst also in Edo. This is simply erroneous. Kabuto literally displayed every Edo Tensei moving at the same speed. Why? Not because they were actually the same speed. However, Kabuto's best interest would to be, have all of his fighters arrive at once within unison, not at some random paces where one character would arrive and then just get jumped by the entire alliance. So yeah. We also know that the command to send them to the battlefield, this not being the full power command that many think, rather it's actually the command that allows them to act at the highest level of efficiency, which Itachi is a really blatant display of this. And what I'm talking about is you could see that when he first pulls up, he remains with his 3 Tomoe out whilst fighting KCM1 Naruto and Killer Bee. Itachi was capable of parrying all of their attacks. We can see that when Nagato, following him absorbing the V2 Eight-Tails cloak, is a blitz level above KCM1 and B, then in order to combat Edo Nagato, Itachi then uses MS in the most suppressed state as possible, and then that was more than enough, and then he just blitzed him around. And then when requiring more power, it advanced even further from the suppressed state, and Itachi destroyed over 33% of the Shibaku Tensei, teaching Naruto about teamwork. There are obviously several other instances throughout the war arc, but yeah, still, you get the point. Kakuzu is not moving at relative speed to Edo Itachi. Now, for the second main Kakuzu argument, this one is admittedly very well formulated, however is still wrong nonetheless. This argument is that we know that Edo reanimations are weaker than their alive states. Kakuzu is capable of reacting, catching, and tanking a full transformed Matatabi Paul Strike from Yugito, which would scale above the weaker Yugito who blitzed KCM1 Naruto in the war whilst only in a V2 state. So, what's wrong with this argument? Well, firstly, let's begin with Kakuzu reacting to Yugito. The scene takes place in chapter 313, in which we could see that they were able to lure Yugito out and she instantly transforms into her full state. Now, let's note her position. Kakuzu is slightly in front of Hidan and are both still at a solid distance from Yugito's base. Both of Yugito's paws are stable near her mid-knee section, with the left paw being closer to Hidan and Kakuzu than the right. On the next page, we could see that Yugito's primed her hand back ready to attack, and which is blatantly shown that her right paw is now all the way behind her head. And Kakuzu sometime during the draw time was able to simply put his hands up and then was slammed into the ground. So, obviously, Kakuzu wasn't outputting force, however, it did still slam him into the ground nonetheless. However, for speed, it's even worse since we know that her right hand went from knee level to behind the head, fully extending to hitting, which means that Kakuzu is reacting to the drawback, not the actual attack speed down itself. I'll give the example that I did in the other video when I talked about this. Imagine me and you are in a boxing ring. I'm a far better boxer than you speed-wise. I then want to hit you with a very strong blow, and I wind my arm all the way down to my ass and completely rotate and try to hit a mean haymaker on you. You could then put your arms up far before the attack is ever sent in motion. This follows the same exact rationale. Kakuzu is scaling to the drawback speed if you're being generous, not the strike itself. The next problem is that we know that when Yugito strikes KCM1, he was still recovering from the prior attack, and then he tanked her attack. This is past B already noting that their fighting is quite different due to the Sharingan and Rinnegan projections, meaning that Kakuzu is rightfully not that level in speed, and it's much more around the squad he fought in Shippuden, around like the 315 area. As we know that even when he was reacting from behind, Shikamaru was able to react to Kakuzu and Kakashi and is shown outpacing Hidan, who is literally shown to be relative to Kakuzu in speed. Therefore, Minato would have an insane advantage in speed. I will admit though that Kakuzu is not fodder by any means. He has some very impressive jutsu, the most notable being his Searing Migraine, which is clearly far above Kakashi's water style, his false darkness, which canceled out 2 Raikage at once, and the most problematic ability would be Kakuzu's Diamond Morph, which I don't really see Minato's basic kunai working. However, a Rasengan, probably. We know that Kakashi's Raikage and Minato's Rasengan could be relative, or at least Minato's would be relative to Naruto's, which would be able to pierce the heart, as his Raikage was able to do so. Now, many people have said that the Diamond Morph sucks, and the statements all get contradicted, referencing the statement which it says something along the lines of it has no blind spots, which does not mean it can tank attacks from all sides, just that when his hearts are actually all out fighting, they can look out for him, boasting the advantage of him knowing where the opponents are. Anyway, Minato should definitely be able to penetrate it and slam him with the Rasengan, considering it was able to damage Obito and blow his arm off. The Yellow Flash also has access to many Uzumaki class sealing ninjutsu, meaning that Minato could also just seal Kakuzu if it came down to that. Now, Hidan is also in the battle, but let's be honest, Minato in character is always thirsty for the win and doesn't negotiate anything, so if Minato beats Kakuzu, Hidan isn't touching him, so yeah, Minato slams. Now, yes, this is one of the points where Naruto surpassed Minato in something, jutsu creation, being finally able to create the Rasen Shuriken when Minato couldn't. Now, before someone brings it up, the volume statement does not even mention Minato, Lord Fourth, Yellow Flash, nothing. So no, the Rasen Shuriken isn't relative to Minato. Minato versus Pain can honestly be its own topic. Now, there are actually really good articulated arguments on each side, and I will say directly that I think Minato is the favorite, just purely stylistically. But let's analyze how this fight would truly go down as it is one of the more complex matches of the series. Now, to grasp if Pain could even react to the 4th Hokage, I think we should discuss how Minato aligns with KCM, where that aligns with Sage Mode Naruto, and where he scales in relativity to Pain. So, Minato's like KCM, how fast is he truly? Well, I think to answer this question, I think just saying that he's above KCM 1 level is the most fair interpretation here. Reason being is that we know that when Minato was a Jonin, that's who, all the Yellow Flash statements are actually talking about. These right here are 2 of the most blatant ones right here. I'll just throw on screen. But is there truly a difference between Hokage Minato and Jonin Minato? Well, yes. We know that in the 4th data book, it states that A's V2 cloak boasts a godlike speed not inferior to the Yellow Flash. Meaning that, from that statement, V2 Raikage is either equal or greater than the Yellow Flash, being Jonin Minato. However, in Minato's 4th Hokage databook page, it states that, as Hokage, quote, he was praised among all ninja as the greatest in godlike speed. Greatest in godlike speed. Which, since A boasts a godlike speed, now we have Hokage Minato above V2 Raikage, who's greater than or equal to Jonin Minato. Meaning that, yes, there is a difference with Hokage being faster than Jonin. Now, just how much of a difference is there really? Well, surpassing Minato isn't a super complicated narrative. Essentially, during the Akatsuki suppression, he unlocked the Rasen Shuriken, something Minato blatantly failed to do, or didn't have enough time to do, and added nature release to the Rasengan. Then, during the Pain arc, Naruto had been training and harnessing his natural senjutsu, and then straight up stated that Naruto surpassed Minato, referencing his Sage Mode, since even when Minato is a perfect Sage, it does not last that long, and he doesn't even use it in battle in a life or death situation, and it does take a while, and doesn't last that long at all once again. Then, when Naruto attempts to enter the war, another attribute needed to be surpassed, in which Kishimoto really started to emphasize that as a Jonin, the Raikage used to battle with, even the Yellow Flash. However, with his speed increased and experience hardened, he is no longer inferior to him, being again that he is either his equal or superior to that Jonin Minato. And then Naruto, with the uses of body flicker, was able to blitz this Raikage, with even the whole flashback corroborating the narrative of both Jonin Minato and Naruto moving at the same pattern and everything. However, obviously, yes, speed is the best category, but surpassing Minato's Hokage speed has yet to come, and is far more ambiguous. However, I believe that Naruto surpassing his father was when he was fighting all the Jinchuriki, as that was the last comparison made to Minato's speed, with Kakashi believing Naruto was Minato. Then, however, once against Obito and KCM2, Naruto spreads his chakra out and impresses Kurama so much so that Kurama leads to the conclusion of Naruto has long surpassed both Minato and Kushina. So we know that White Mask Obito fight KCM2 is like above Minato, but the early Jinchuriki fight KCM2 is probably fair, or if not, Minato could just be slightly below that. So, yeah, Minato as Hokage is really fast. We also know that his body flicker is above his own combat speed, as we can see that when all the Hokage need to arrive at the war, Minato arrives first with the uses of body flicker. Now, yes, Tobirama's body flicker is also arguably above KCM2 Minato's combat speed, and his body flicker is beyond that speed that Tobirama was moving at. So, yeah, his body flicker is insane. And yes, Minato does use body flicker in character when he needs to move at the fastest pace possible. We could see that when Minato needed to get to the battlefield, when he needed to save Naruto, when he needed to save Kakashi, he all resorted to body flicker rather than plain out teleporting via flying Raijin. Now, if the kunai is like already out there and marked and it's an optimal location to move, he does choose this as shown against Obito. So yes, Minato could definitely use body flicker and blitz all the paths. Since we know that in KCM1 he stayed to be stronger than he was when he fought Pain, and in Naruto's strength can be translated to categories, like for example during the Chunin exams, Naruto noted Lee's speed whilst calling it strength. Speed is also like the most emphasized aspect of KCM1, so since Sage Mode was able to hit, tag, react, and even blitz Pain, there's simply no way that Pain could react. I will say though, that Pain's abilities are a solid counter in this match, of course being his jutsu such as Bansho Tenin or Shinrai Tensei. Now, I'm going to be completely real. Bansho Tenin would not really work in Pain's favor if he tries it. However, Shinrai Tensei would be pretty helpful. The 4 data book claiming that Shinrai Tensei can push all things in creation, and it has really good feats. So if Minato were to, say, throw a kunai, then it could just get pushed away. I think that Pain could do well if utilizing certain strategies. Now, would he ever, do these in character? Well, not in the fights we saw him in, since he was, holding back and waiting. But still, Pain could, activate Rainmaker Jutsu, which is a sensory ability, in which Pain just hails down rain and is able to sense every single drop, which means that Pain could sense where Minato is going to teleport to, or when he's allocating chakra and whatnot to those places, and then he could just pre-fire Shinrai Tensei and then push Minato into soul absorption. But still, even with Minato, he probably could still body flicker away, if I'm being honest. Even Shinrai Tensei wouldn't really work, and it's not too, and it's not like Pain could even resort to Chibaku Tensei, because Minato could have just teleport out. He'd just teleport out of that straight up. Even whilst talking to Naruto, he wasn't really worried about Pain at all as an opponent, and is implying that Obito is the true threat, not Pain. So Minato would also beat Pain if he were in Naruto's place. So this match is the easiest of all the matches to decipher, being what if Naruto is in the place of Minato against Jonin A and B during the Third Great War. The reason for this being is that we actually get a direct narrative comparison of when Naruto obtained that level of speed, with the Raikage A being now implied after that training to be on the level of Jonin Minato that he fought in speed, which KCM1 Naruto is able to blitz this Raikage, typically with the calcs getting this feat more impressive than what Minato did. So if KCM1 Naruto is able to blitz a Raikage, who's relative to the young Minato who blitzed that other young Raikage, I don't really see any way that the Raikage could combat this Naruto. Now, we do actually know that during this encounter, B was superior to that Raikage, at least in terms of showing, with some thinking that Killer B even perception blitzed Minato, but I mean, no, this is just wrong. It's essentially when Minato just teleported behind A and is preparing to stab him, and then B hits the Raikage, pushing him out of the way, replacing him with the tentacle from the Eight Tails. Minato then remarks, "That's the," showing clear shock. However, this does not mean that Minato did not react to it prior to this. Minato in character, even right before this, doesn't show the typical reaction markers as most characters. Yes, and he still blitzed the Raikage A. And for the shock part, that is clearly just Minato finding out that the Eight-Tails Jinchuriki was arrived on the battlefield, and his entire tentacle is out in front of him. Which, since the tentacle ability is unique to B and only Yugito later on in the war, Minato is probably scared that the full Biju actually came out, not that it was actually just blitzing him. And later in the interaction, we can see that when he does have the knife to Minato that Minato didn't see, B straight up says that he prepared for it, not actually blitzing him in the moment, but rather he prepared to engage in a mutual strike. So again, KCM1 Naruto being beyond this level would be enough to provoke a proper retreat, similar to how the original encounter went down. So yeah, Raikage fight KCM1 Naruto should win this battle pretty easily. The fourth Hokage versus the third Raikage. A match that has some cool emphasis narratively, with Minato being the man who beat and put Kumogakure into the retreat back in the war. And then the third Raikage was furious, and he was the leader who died in that war fighting 10,000 shinobi for 3 days and 3 nights. Both solo gods of the Third Great War. So, what would have actually happened if they fought? Well, obviously we can't put them in the Third War since Minato will be in Naruto's place against him. So, how does this go? Well, to be honest, at first I thought, stomp in Minato's favor for sure. But then I got to thinking, and I think that the third Raikage could bring some interesting questions in place, which we will get to in a minute. But first, we need to, once again, see how the third Raikage stacks up in speed. In which we can say the third Raikage is honestly really inconsistent. Not just him, but like that whole minor segment of the war with him and that part of the alliance. And what do I mean? Well, we know that KCM1 Naruto somewhat blitzed the fourth Raikage, who is either above or at least relative to a perfect Jinchuriki Killer B, which would be obviously far above the normal Gyuki that was a rival to the third, which creates a clear precedence that the fourth is over the third. But then, we can see that the third Raikage is more than able to react and dodge a clone of KCM1 Naruto, even whilst using, let's say, dirty tactics, with the chakra arms or whatever. So then, what does this mean? Well, you could always chop it up to say that it being a clone of KCM1 Naruto hints to why you could react because it's just slower, which I do lean with, but I think it's also implied that the fourth isn't much slower than Naruto, but was just suppressed in that portion of the war. So realistically, they would still be relative in speed, which I do lean to. We also know that the third's cloak doesn't have V2, so maybe you could say that give the fourth the edge since he does have a V2. Now, another thing you could say is that Kishimoto was just tripping when right in this area of the war, because in that fight, the Raikage was like, everybody, use your Earth style on me, and they did. What? Outside of that, though, there's still a lot of evidence supporting the third Raikage's durability being far above most people's, including A, the fourth, and B as well, which is even crazier when taking into account that the Edo Tensei regenerative properties, which to be put in perspective, the things he tanks is actually ridiculous. First of which being Tamari's wind style casting net, which actually cuts his whole arm off in base, may I mind you. This being the picture that's displayed in the last data book claiming that it has the most powerful wind in all of Tsunegakure, which would be above Gaara's sand in power. Then, after that, once again, he goes into his cloak, and then he gets hit by the durability negating Rasen Shuriken, and literally just gets up and tanks it. One thing interesting to note, though, is that about this scene is that the Rasen Shuriken's pure force was enough to just remove the cloak. Now, Minato doesn't obviously have more force than the Rasen Shuriken. However, the single most important thing is to ask is is Minato so far above KCM1 that the sensory given by Sage Mode would be unnecessary? How much faster is Minato than KCM1 compared to Sage Mode's reaction being faster than KCM1? And is it large enough to be superior to Sage Mode's increased reaction? And to be honest, yeah, I do think so. Reason being is that MKCM or KCM 1.5, whichever term you prefer, is a blitz level above KCM 1. This due to MKCM being relative to a later EMS Sasuke, who is a rival to the MS Itachi, who is stated in the fourth data book, which obviously I've explained before why 3 Tomoe to MS is a blitz level, but I'll sum it up here. Essentially, Itachi was relative to B and Naruto in his 3 Tomoe, then Nagato's a blitz level above them, and then Itachi blitzes him with his MS. So MKCM would be on that level, or potentially superior to that MS Itachi, which could be a blitz level above KCM1. You could also go, if you go by KCM1, KCM 1.5, and KCM2, they're all linear increases, and KCM1 would just have that same level of blitz, but personally, I don't think it's that linear. Rather, just KCM2 is a bit faster, or it's just better channeled with more chakra into it. So yeah, I do think this advantage does give Minato the edge if he tries to pull the Rasengan move to the elbow, which Naruto did to cause the Raikage to stab himself with his own Hell Stab, which also I don't really think Minato would have much trouble finding that out, since we know that Minato would still get intel from the Alliance and Dodai and whatnot. So with him being the genius that he is, and him being smarter than Naruto, I don't see Naruto finding out, but not Minato. Come on. So, again, since we know that they're the raw speed-wise, Minato would be quite above this Raikage and would be fast enough to force the Raikage to hit himself and penetrate himself. So, Minato could just win that way. Or the other way you could say is that Minato just seals him or marks him with an FTG, which I believe would be sufficient. However, it's just how the seal would even have to be placed in question. And this is what I was talking about in the beginning when I said it poses some weird questions, which would the seal be placed on the external cloak, or would it just fall through to the skin if he actually stuck it there? What happens if it gets placed on the cloak? Does it just get destroyed? Well, I'm not really sure. This does get kind of complicated, but Minato does possess the FTG seal, which is stated in the third data book's dictionary to be beyond the concepts of space and distance. So there's also definitely some type of seal that could be used if you do think like it'd be beyond that, since there's obviously a distance between the skin and the cloak, so it's like it would just kind of move through, I guess, if that makes sense. And if he does decide to mark him, I think that it just probably like goes through the cloak just due to that insane statement. But let me know what you guys think. So in conclusion, Minato beats the third Raikage like mid-diff. Okay, listening. I know you may all be thinking to yourself, White Mask Obito versus Hokage Minato. Obito is far faster. However, is this true? Well, yes. Obito is faster than Minato. However, they are probably still relative, being both like KCM2 level. But Minato still has the mark seal on Obito's back. So Minato in character would just like know the seal, teleport, and murder Obito. Maybe. But Obito also has his passive Kamui. So then Minato just couldn't do much. But let's talk about Minato versus Kamui. So the fourth data book states that Kamui is passive. However, what does this mean? Well, it means exactly what it sounds. There are a few interpretations to Minato blitzing Kamui, quote unquote. But it could just be that during their whole fight, Obito was in his 3-Tomoe state. So it would just be only passive in the MS state, not the base one. Which I do agree with this for the most part. However, I think that the ability being active, meaning its properties would still stay the same. But we know that in order for it to like phase, there has to be like a static speed at which it does this and at which the Kamui activates upon someone coming. So is Minato just above that level? And yeah, my interpretation is that we know the allocation of chakra through separate ocular nerves does get kind of complicated, with Sasuke using his EMS chakra through his Rinnegan ocular nerve, which actually enhances the EMS as implied in the data book. Or how about the other times in which you could argue that the EMS ability was used and whilst in a 3-Tomoe nerve state? So essentially it could just be said that whilst yes the ability is active and probably still passive, but the speed of the activation is just slower due to like the less chakra being there. So Minato is a blitz level above 3-Tomoe Kamui, but the MS could still be above, but he could still just like bait Obito into materializing for him to hit him like he did in the original fight. So there is still a chance that Obito could just use his slightly superior speed to combat Minato and react to him. However, I just don't see this being the case, just due to the fact that previously mentioned the low-end relativity in speed and Obito's durability. However, Obito's durability has actually been significantly increased, as we could see that he was able to just completely tanker a Sengon to the shoulder, which whenever he was in Yellow Mask, he was unable to do so, and literally has an entire arm blown off just from the second hand force of it hitting his back so hard. So in terms of AP, there isn't really much to say that Minato could just straight up harm Obito. Maybe people are quick to bring up the idea that like the kunai would just slice through Obito like it did like later in the war, but this is probably wrong for a few reasons. First, seeing that Minato is in KCM2, a form that severely enhances his limits, which would grant Minato greater force to implement into his cutting power. Second, this is a deathly weakened Obito whose durability could just be lowered to like a large degree. People do commonly bring up how Minato can cut the Eight Tails tentacle, but I'm not going to argue too much on that and just talk about how like everybody else does. I'm just going to state that we know Madara is capable of holding down the entire Eight Tails, and Madara and Obito are stated to have the same overwhelming power in the fourth data book. So, is there anything Minato can do? Well, sure. Minato could most certainly seal Obito if it came down to it. So, how about instead of ignorantly arguing about his attack potency, let's just like go into sealing jutsu. The fourth Hokage is a master of sealing, educated on sealing not from any normal shinobi, but Kushina Uzumaki, a woman from a clan wiped out due to like her ruthless sealing capabilities, and the land of eddies, obviously. The ones that we know Minato has possession, just to name a few, are the 5-prong seal, the 8-tetragram seal, the Reaper Death seal, and the Flying Rising seal. It's also implied that right before he died, he only used Reaper Death just to split the chakra, and that he would be capable of like sealing a full 9 Tails level threat with another jutsu, and then he just used the 8-tetragram in Naruto. But it's implied that Minato obviously still, as I just mentioned, could have sealed Kurama with a 9 Tails, so that's pretty important. So Minato could most certainly seal Obito, and if you don't think so, And if you don't go along with that line of scaling, he could just BFR Obito, which is the most likely thing. And if the sealing just would not work, that'd definitely be what he would do. Because I highly doubt Minato will try to engage in any sort of ninjutsu bouts. Because whenever he fought the weaker Yellow Mask Obito, he was very wary of his power for sure. So now that he has a literal Rinnegan, Minato would be beyond the incentive needed just to take him out as quick as possible. This Obito's fire style is also really potent though. If you do believe that he tries to bring that out, in which Minato doesn't really have any direct water style ninjutsu to counter it, Obito's fire style was shown exceptionally outperforming Madara's as they move in equal distance, yet Obito is actually farther back. Obito also has another trick he likes to use, and it's pretty much where he just shoots weapons out of Kamui. So yeah, these weapons are fast enough to move or to be equal to Madara's projectiles as well. But for both projectiles and the fire style, Minato does just counter that by teleporting away. Now, I will say Minato only really does this good due to the already pre-placed seal. Without that though, is most definitely not a Minato favorite matchup, and I would give it to Obito. But that's not what's happening here. So Minato should just be able to beat Obito high difficulty. So okay, last but not least, we have Naruto versus Yellow Mask 17-year-old Obito. Which now, I'm sure you're thinking in your head, wait. If Naruto is above or relative to the White Mask Obito, then he would just destroy, and this match isn't even close at all. But let's go over that. So we can see that during their fight throughout most of Chapter 608, Obito is outperforming Naruto in several occasions, such as blitzing him with the wood style, or just plain out reacting to both him and Kakashi at the same time. So yeah, Naruto can be a very low-end relative, but White Mask is still superior. So, how does he stack up to Yellow Mask Obito? Is there even a chance that Yellow Mask could contend with KCM2 Naruto? Well, maybe. When Minato fights Obito, he is shown being able to hold back his speed and still react to the point where he lured Obito into a speed confrontation and completely statues him and blitzes him behind the back with the Rasengan. Minato, however, still concludes that Obito is so much of a threat that it would just be best if he gave up his life to entrust his son Naruto to master the Nine Tails to beat the Masked Man. This is stated several times throughout the manga that he would need to master the Nine Tails, and I'll just toss those on screen. Naruto then did master the Nine Tails in KCM2, and was just short of the power required to impart to beat that whole Obito with the Rinnegan, I guess. Now, moving back to where I think Minato scales in comparison to KCM2, it's a level slightly below or relative to that KCM2 that fought the Jinchuriki, which means that if Minato was able to blitz Obito, then this Naruto should be more than capable of doing the same thing, just straight up. Now, Naruto also has an overwhelming advantage over both Minato and Obito in AP, so KCM2 Naruto versus Obito is just an amazing fair win in Naruto's favor. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think that I downplayed Naruto or Minato, or do you think, or maybe you wish I covered another matchup, I guess? And if so, just drop that in the comments below and I'll make sure to answer it. So yeah, please consider subscribing though and liking the video, as I do put a lot of effort in my content, and that would help me out immensely. And yeah, as always, love you guys.